Good evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, our guest will be Assistant Professor of Political Science at Sabancı University, Berk Esen. We'll be talking about developments in domestic politics of Turkey. But first, let's take a look at this week's developments. MHP Chair Devlet Bahçeli has targeted the Turkish Medical Association after the association launched a series of protest events accusing the government of mismanaging the COVID-19 pandemic.
Sharing a series of messages on his social media account, MHP Chair Devlet Bahçeli, ally of the ruling Justice and Development Party, has called on the relevant authorities to close down the Turkish Medical Association and take legal action against its executives. Bahçeli targeted the Medical Association after the organization announced on September 14 that they are to hold various demonstrations throughout the week to protest the government's COVID-19 normalization plan amid the increasing number of infections. The association said that healthcare staff are exhausted and the government is unable to manage the pandemic. In a statement released on September 14, the association said, "We will continue reminding the responsible parties who have blamed citizens and left the burden entirely on the shoulders of physicians and health workers of their historical responsibility." In his tweets, Bahçeli wrote, "The entity of treason called the Turkish Medical Association will apparently wear black ribbons in all medical institutions to supposedly raise concerns about our deceased people and health workers. This attempt is a poisonous and evil plot. My call is this. The Turkish Medical Association is fueling groundless blemishes and suspicions about human and public health during such a sensitive period. For this reason, the medical association that has the word Turkish only in its name must be closed immediately and without delay. A legal action must be taken against its executives." In the face of Bahçeli's remarks, messages of support poured in from Twitter users for the TTB, with the hashtag campaign İyi ki TTB var, so glad we have TTB, going viral. Public health specialist and member of the Turkish Medical Association, Professor Ahmet Saltık, spoke to Medyascope TV regarding Bahçeli's comments. Professor Saltık said,
"I wonder if he is aware of the type of institution the Turkish Medical Association is, its legitimacy in the law and its constitutional status. There may be several reasons for the statement made by Bahçeli. One of them is to change the agenda. The ruling power is in an absolute need of this. But perhaps most importantly, the statements made by the Turkish Medical Association in recent times have disturbed the ruling power. I have been a member of the Turkish Medical Association for the past 45 years. I have had different duties within the association. It is the only professional body there is for doctors. I would like to remind Bahçeli that the Turkish Medical Association is protected under Article 135 of the Constitution. Let me be even more clear so as to make it easier to understand. The Turkish Medical Association is under the protection of the Constitution. It is not only the Medical Association that is protected under this article, but other professional bodies such as the Bar Association, which disturb the ruling power. They have been under protection since the formation of the 1961 Constitution. So with this statement, we can say that Bahçeli has not even read the Constitution. Article 135 clearly states that the Turkish Medical Association is a public institution and every one of the 66 associations under the umbrella of the Turkish Medical Association are considered to be a legal entity. If what Bahçeli said were to be executed, first of all, Article 135 of the Constitution would have to be amended. For this to happen, the AKP and its ally MHP would need 360 votes in parliament. If they are able to get that many votes, then Erdogan would have to take it to a referendum. I doubt that any party from the opposition would support such a constitutional change. Professor Saltık further commented on Turkey's fight with the coronavirus, stating, "The Ministry of Health continues to lie. The data on the chart the minister shares are unrealistic. I believe the Turkish Medical Association will soon release data regarding a study they have conducted with the Directorate of Cemeteries about the death toll. Things cannot continue this way. Poverty, unemployment and suicides have increased in society. Turkey needs to create the resources necessary in order to go into a full 14-day lockdown. Turkey needs to take this seriously and apply it."
CHP Chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu visited Ahmet Davutoğlu, chair of the Future Party, at the party's headquarters. The courtesy visit was followed by a press statement.
During the press statements, Kılıçdaroğlu noted that they discussed Turkey's problems with the world, the economy, and the general outlook of the Future Party. Kılıçdaroğlu underlined the importance that both parties form a common discourse, as both parties longed for a Turkey where anyone could freely express their thoughts. For his part, Davutoğlu stated the importance of politicians to come together and exchange views in a period that's witnessing extensive changes in the region and in the country. Davutoğlu said, "Recently, there is such a political atmosphere that politicians' conversation and speech are dominated by a polarizing language as if it was an extraordinary situation. The visit of Mr. Chairman to our party is a good start." Earlier in the week, Davutoğlu also responded to former HDP co-chair Selahattin Demirtaş's remarks on unity among the opposition, stating, "In principle, I find it appropriate to talk to anyone who believes in democracy and who distance themselves from terror for the future of this country." Davutoğlu, who founded the Future Party late last year after resigning from the ruling Justice and Development Party, is seen as one of the main politicians responsible for the destruction in Kurdish majority cities following the June 7, 2015 general elections. During his time as Prime Minister, Davutoğlu repeatedly targeted Demirtaş and the HDP.
People's Democratic Party co-chair Mithat Sancar was the guest of Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır this week. During the interview, Sancar spoke about Demirtaş's recent interview with Medyascope, the communication lines between HDP and MPs in prison, HDP's current position within the opposition alliance, relations with the ruling AKP and its breakaway parties DEVA and Future parties, and HDP's concrete steps to solve Turkey's Kurdish problem through its peaceful action program. Here are some of the excerpts from the hour-long interview.
"We believe Turkey needs a strong and wide democratic alliance. However, political parties are not necessarily the primary address where this democratic alliance will be formed. Our calls of unity are not exclusively and primarily made to political parties. We believe in a democratic alliance that believes in a change on a social level, strong on the social level, an alliance that aims at transformation. If we succeed, then a dynamic affecting political parties will have been created. The Democratic Action Plan HDP has been working on for the past 3 months aims this. We have also made calls to other political parties. Sometimes our voter base can get angry with us. They tell us, how can you have such relations with the CHP when they stay silent at the lifting of parliamentary immunity of HDP MPs? Or, why do you have a soft approach to parties who are very harsh with the HDP? We have received such criticism, but I believe our choices are right. Perhaps we have made mistakes when applying these goals. Perhaps we are lacking in certain ways. Perhaps we don't take into consideration the emotions of our voter base. As the co-chair of the HDP, I accept these criticisms. Nonetheless, I believe in our basic policies. Some of the statements made by Ahmet Davutoğlu are not right. They are problematic. I find the statements coming on behalf of the DEVA party more meaningful, more positive in terms of their style of address. First of all, I take issue with the notion that any party being in dialogue with us is somehow doing us a favor or is granting us some sort of legitimacy. We refuse this approach. Being in dialogue with one another does not mean someone is doing a favor to the other. It is the obligation of all those who want democracy. If certain parties or leaders make impositions on us or force preconditions upon us, this means that they are not open to dialogue. We are the third biggest party in this country. Our most significant dialogue is with the people. We have received around 6 million votes. This is how we move forward. From the west of the country to its Kurdish regions, we have countless relations. We have relations with many parties and organizations. A party coming out and suggesting that a dialogue with us is only possible if certain conditions are met should ask itself where it gets such a right. We gain our legitimacy from our people. We gain our legitimacy from the politics we pursue. Individuals or political parties attacking the HDP with the language of the current ruling party, looking at the HDP with an understanding reminiscent of the methods of the current ruling party, will weaken the democratic alliance of Turkey. Further, they are not sincere in their stance to be a real opposition to the current ruling party. Those who have this point of view, while claiming to be on the opposition, are only facilitating the work of the People's Alliance. In terms of concrete steps, our Central Executive Committee will meet this week. We have a declaration entitled Call to Peace, signed on August 31st, and I don't think it has received the attention it deserves. Some are willingly ignoring it. But we know we have made an important breakthrough. We know it has been noted by others, also because we made a call to everyone in order to start working on a concrete program for peace. It is not just an abstract call. This is the problem of this country. The problem is the Kurdish issue, its democratic resolution. It is the issue of war, which needs to be resolved through peace. That is democratic politics, dialogue, and negotiations. We have said that we are ready to take responsibility for this and, in accordance, made calls to different fractions. This is not an empty call. We're going to fill this call with peace politics. We're going to prepare an action plan for peace. Why are we underlining peace so much? The current ruling party is able to carry out its destructive politics by using war as an excuse. It is through war that it is also able to divide the opposition. Further, these destructive policies relating to war are not limited to the country. It has turned into a regional policy. The threat of war, or at least policies relating to tension and confrontation. These have no advantages to the people of Turkey. We believe in democratic politics, dialogue and negotiations for domestic politics, and diplomacy and dialogue in our regional political approach. If you take war as a tool from the current ruling party, then they will have nothing left to survive. I don't believe any population has an ascribed essence. If I come from the leftist tradition, this approach is not a dialectic one. But let's put that aside. When even individuals do not have unchanging essences, seeing whole populations as having unchanging essences, it becomes a politically unfortunate position. Then, people who aim for transformation and change should never enter politics, shouldn't become journalists or academics. Unless it is for personal gain, then these lose sense. Change is possible. This country has proven it at different times. Instead of saying that this is a right to society, it is more accurate to say that up until today, the left was unable to provide a believable, strong alternative to this society.
This evening, our guest is Assistant Professor of Political Science at Sabancı University, Berk Esen.
Good evening, Mr. Esen. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to start first by talking a little bit about former HDP co-chair Selahattin Demirtaş's interview with our editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır. We had a chance to discuss this interview last week as well with Osman Sert from the Ankara Institute and provided a translation of experts to our viewers last week as well. So when you look at the overall tone of the interview, what type of political leader do we see Demirtaş to be in light of what he says during the interview? What can you tell us about his style of address?
I think in that interview, he had a very conciliatory tone, and it's very clear that Demirtaş is a democratic leader who is at this point seeking compromise and reconciliation with different political actors. What was quite striking to me was that he was not only trying to he's not only trying to approach other opposition leaders such as Meral Akşener. He was very clear in saying that he wanted to talk to her, but he was also seeking a conciliatory tone with Ahmet Davutoğlu and even President Erdogan. And that's quite surprising because, of course, for some time now, for the last 5 to 6 years, the Kurdish political movement has been at loggerheads with the government, and the government has increased pressure and engaged in a number of authoritarian moves against the HDP. And that has landed Selahattin Demirtaş into prison, and he's been in prison for the last 4 years. So even with these leaders, he was seeking a conciliation. So I think in that sense, it was quite interesting. Of course, Demirtaş is a young politician. He's a charismatic young politician who has really energized the public, and quite a large number of opposition voters have supported him in the 2014 presidential elections as well as 2015 general elections. And it was to his credit that HDP ended up crossing the 10% electoral threshold. So in that sense, he continues that approach, the approach of what we call to be an ethno-populist line in the political science literature. So obviously he is seeking support of a minority group within the country, but he also engages in a conciliatory populist discourse in order to appeal to a large number of voters. Now, what he did additionally in this interview is that he's trying to create a democratic coalition within the opposition camp that will basically bring together all the opposition parties in an attempt to basically democratize the country. So what he is trying to do is to, I think, merge the Kurdish question, which of course HDP has been very much interested in resolving, with Turkey's democratic problems. And I think in his mind, it's not possible to resolve the Kurdish question without attaining a democratic regime in Turkey. And the way to do that is for the opposition to act in a uniform fashion, in a united fashion, win the elections, come to power, and establish a new regime. And to be able to do that, in that interview, he was laying out steps of a new political model, a new political agenda to do it.
Mm-hmm. Before going into whether or not these words have some sort of echo within the opposition leaders at large, I'd like to talk perhaps a bit more about the style of address that Demirtas has and compare it with the style of address of other politicians in the political spectrum. Now, you said he had a reconciliatory approach, but he also has this, he seems to be a politician who seems to prioritize the humanitarian aspect, the human connection between leaders in order to not have a polarizing language, so that political identities don't polarize these individuals. And when we look at the spectrum of politicians, especially those coming from the AKP, or more specifically, perhaps Erdogan or Süleyman Soylu or even Devlet Bahçeli, their tone is rather menacing and threatening in terms of their approach to the public as well as other leaders. Demirtas has said that this humanitarian approach is key in actively combating the AKP, as opposed to simply waiting for the end of their rule to come due to whatever other external reason. Now, this week we've seen the CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu pay a visit to future party chair Ahmet Davutoğlu. Earlier in August, İYİ Party chair Meral Akşener visited Ali Babacan. Do you think these visits are routine, or are they saying something about a new alliance or a new style in politics different from the past?
I think these visits are becoming routinized. For the last few years, the CHP leader Kılıçdaroğlu has been seeking such visits with opposition leaders, and particularly with the İYİ Party leader Meral Akşener. What we are currently seeing is a widening of this approach to new opposition actors, particularly, of course, Ali Babacan and Ahmet Davutoğlu, because those two figures have been, opposed Erdogan's moves in the last few years, but it's only recently that they resigned from their party, established new parties of their own, and joined the opposition. So that's why these visits, I think the number of these visits will increase in the coming years. And certainly Demirtas's discourse or tone seems to contribute to that. Of course, when you look at the ruling elites, not just Erdogan, but also all the other cabinet ministers, as well as Bahçeli and Süleyman Soylu, they seem to be pushing for a very polarizing discourse, because the economy isn't doing so well. And the government is hemorrhaging votes, or the governing coalition is hemorrhaging votes. So the only way that the government can secure its voters is to push for this polarizing discourse, so that the AKP and the MHP voters would not have much of an incentive to support opposition figures or opposition parties. So that's why there seems to be clear divergence between the opposition and the governing coalition when it comes to this discourse. In the case of Selahattin Demirtas, of course, he was a very positive figure in 2014, 2015, when he achieved much success as the leader of HDP. But since then, the pro-AKP media has followed a very negative campaign against him. And I think his unfavorability numbers have increased over time. And the fact that he's been in prison has sort of contributed to that. So I think what Demirtas is now doing is to overturn that, right? So he's really pushing for this conciliatory tone. And the fact that he's been in prison for the last 4 years, the fact that he's been sort of challenged by this government in this way, he's been persecuted unfairly, and yet he still continues the political struggle, is again creating a positive image on behalf of Demirtas among the opposition voters. And so Demirtas is now using that to branch out to or reach out to İYİ Party voters, because it's quite clear that this coalition between CHP and İYİ Party has succeeded. And especially in the 2019 local elections, HDP voters have supported many of the CHP candidates in major cities. but there is still quite a strong tension between the E-Party base and the HDP base. And this also obviously entails their leaderships as well. So the task ahead for the opposition parties is to figure out a way to bring together all opposition parties, including E-Party and HDP. And it seems that Demirtas is trying to do that. The fact that he has not mentioned Kılıçdaroğlu's name in that interview, but repeatedly mentioned Davutoğlu and Meral Akşener is, I think, quite indicative of Demirtas's approach of bringing together all these parties. And I think that's a very important development. And in fact, he has taken an extra step of seeking this coalition, not on the basis of leadership level, but he's also trying to come up with an alternative political agenda that will unify, that will bring together all these different parties. So as an E-Party voter or as an HDP voter, you may not particularly like the leader of the other party, but if you can really agree to the common agenda of this democratic coalition, then you may support it in the election. I think that's what Demirtas is seeking.
Let's speak about HDP's position in the opposition alliance, especially in light perhaps of the current co-chair of HDP, Mithat Sancar's interview with Medyascope earlier this week. Now, Mithat Sancar was very adamant during the interview about the idea of being open to dialogue with the HDP on the condition of, so a lot of parties, for example, Ahmet Davutoğlu this week has said that he would be open to speaking with HDP on the condition of. So as if, and Mithat Sancar, the way he puts it is that, you know, it's like as if, you know, these party leaders are doing some sort of favor to the HDP, as if HDP had to somehow show its legitimacy. Sancar offered also concrete steps the HDP has been taking and will take in terms of an action plan for peace. Do you believe the parties within the Nations Alliance will be able to join them on these grounds? Can the opposition even have a meaningful alliance without including the HDP and a concrete kind of solution to the Kurdish problem?
I think it will take a while, but at the end of the day, I'm quite optimistic that all these different opposition parties will be able to come together. Of course, HDP faces a dilemma, and that dilemma has existed since the 2015 June elections. Now, in that election, the Kurdish movement has secured 13% of that, garnered 13% of the vote share, and that was the electoral high mark of this party. But despite that success, HDP very quickly realized that it has no allies or partners that it can speak with. And very quickly, the party was sidelined by AKP. And what's worse, in the coming months, AKP ended up attaining an understanding with MHP to basically switch its policies and to pursue a very ultra-nationalist line against HDP. And HDP could not really get much support from all the other opposition parties. So that's why HDP seems to be gradually changing course, in the sense that it realized the importance of coming to this kind of an inter-party alliance, at least an intra-party understanding. Now, of course, Kurdish question is a very difficult question to resolve. It goes back decades, if not all the way back to the 19th century. So that's why it's going to take a while for voters of CHP, E-Party, or even Davutoğlu's party to really warm up to HDP or to engage in any kind of coalition talks. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that it's going to start right away. But what we are seeing for some time now is that gradually these opposition party elites are warming up to this idea, are seeking talks, if only behind closed doors, and seeking the support of HDP voters. This is something that we clearly saw in the 2019 local elections. I think through these moves, we are beginning to discuss the possibility of all leaders coming together to negotiate on issues, to talk about these issues. So hence Demirtaş's statement, hence Davutoğlu's response, and even Akşener gave a reservedly positive response. This is only going to intensify in the coming months, because there is obviously one clear reason why all these parties have an incentive to come together, and that's the increasing authoritarian structure of Turkish politics. And the fact that AKP is really increasing pressure on the opposition, and has picked a position of not even recognizing the legitimate winners of elections in certain parts of the country, particularly the HDP mayors were not really allowed to take up their seats. Now this can happen to all the other opposition party figures. So that's why they have this incentive to really come together. So actually, ironically, the governing coalition's polarizing discourse is helping bring together the opposition elites who otherwise would not have had the incentive to act together. So they are really pushed onto this course. What is not clear is whether they will be able to take steps soon enough or quick enough to be able to create this democratic front.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this idea of urgency is very much clear in Demirtaş's interview. His call is very urgent, it seems. But what about the voters? I mean, in Mithat Sancar and Ruşen Çakır's interview, Ruşen Çakır states that Turkish society is rather rightist in essence, and Sancar denies this, stating it is a failure of the left to provide a strong alternative, that there is no ascribed kind of essence in that sense. What do you think? Do you believe the people of Turkey are open today for a strong democratic alliance on the left? I mean, you already gave some examples as to how voters have kind of merged together, especially during the local elections and whatnot. But, you know, in the long term, perhaps, do you see this being a reality?
I've listened to that interview. It was actually quite a good interview. I fall somewhere between those two positions. You know, I don't agree with Ruşen Bey that the Turkish society has this preordained or ascribed sense of being conservative and to the right side of the spectrum. I think the main reason for this to happen in Turkish political history has been because right-wing populist parties have been a lot more successful in distributing resources to the needy voters. So it was not because of an ideological sense, but really because right-wing parties have been a lot more successful in winning elections, coming to power, and then distribute resources first to rural voters all throughout 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then gradually to the urban voters after urbanization has taken root. However, I don't particularly agree with Mithat Bey as well, because of course political socialization is important. People do not really change their political loyalties overnight, and these things, you know, and people develop their political allegiances based on their family background. So it's going to take a while to really attain a significant realignment. So we need to be not as pessimistic as Ruşen Bey, but also not overly optimistic as Mithat Bey. I fall somewhere in between. For instance, in that interview, Mithat Bey mentioned the 1970s as a possible example of CHP, a leftist party, changing those dynamics. But even in the 1970s, the highest level that the CHP attained was 41%. Which is more or less what it had in the 1957 elections. And Ecevit could not really come to power on its own, even though labor unions were growing, political left was ascendant I mean, around the globe, not just in Turkey. So we need to be quite vigilant. Having said that, I think what we are seeing is not so much a division between right-wing and left-wing voters. I mean, obviously, some voters are in the left side of the spectrum, others are in the right side of the spectrum. But what is becoming more important, more clear, and for us, in a more optimistic sense, is that a growing number of Turkish voters see Turkish politics along the line of being authoritarian or democratic. So I think within the CHP base, within the E-Party base, and certainly within the HDP base, there is a growing understanding that the biggest problem facing Turkey is the increasing authoritarianism and the perverse political and economic outcomes of that political system. And so there is an urgency to change the political system, and the way that you can do it is through winning elections. That's why a growing number of voters in the opposition camp are willing to vote tactically in a pragmatic sense to attain that. And I think Mithat Bey was very convincing in arguing that that's exactly what HDP voters did in the 2019 local elections. There was no official alliance between the CHP and HDP, but the HDP leadership as well as the party base realized that if CHP candidates were to defeat pro-government candidates in the major cities, that is going to open up some space for the opposition. Now, that urgency has increased, and I think there is enough grounds to attain this kind of a coalition, with one caveat, and that's the point that has been raised as a precondition by some of these opposition leaders, including Davutoğlu. That's PKK's use of arms. That's the big question that is going to complicate things. So it's really important for HDP leaders, including Demirtas, to keep their distance with PKK. I'm not necessarily suggesting that they don't at this point, but they need to really emphasize that point because that's the only point left for the governing coalition to divide up the opposition camp. If they fail to do so, I think this front will emerge in the coming months.
Berk Esen, thank you so much for having joined us this evening.
Thank you for inviting me.
Turkey tested its first Chinese coronavirus vaccine on 3 volunteers on September 16th. The phase 3 trial of the vaccine was tested on 3 healthcare workers who volunteered for the first time at Hacettepe University's Faculty of Medicine in the capital, Ankara. Experts and officials say that Russian and British vaccines are also on their way for trial in Turkey.
The trials of this experimental coronavirus vaccine will be held in 2 phases. The first phase is planned to be administered on 1,200 volunteering healthcare workers. Only the people who are in the high-risk groups will be administered in the first phase. Following the first 1,200 volunteers, people between the ages of 18 and 60 might be included in the second phase, in which the aim is to vaccinate 13,000 volunteers. These volunteers will be monitored for a year, and the vaccine will later be administered to volunteers with chronic diseases as well. Professor Dr. Murat Akova explained the vaccine's feasibility and the upcoming process to Medyascope. He is a faculty member at the Hacettepe Medical School, Department of Infectious Diseases and Clinical Microbiology. Regarding the process of volunteering, Professor Akova stated, "The volunteers who wish to be vaccinated are first tested for COVID-19. If they test negative, then they are subjected to antibody testing. If they also do not have antibodies, then they can be administered the vaccine." Regarding the Chinese Sinovac vaccine safety, Professor Dr. Akova emphasized what phase 3 trial signifies. This is the vaccine's phase 3 trial. This means that it has been tested on a lower number of volunteers in 2 different phases. The same vaccine is currently being tested in Brazil, Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia as well. The vaccination results will be sent to the World Health Organization after the 2 phases are completed in Turkey. There will be different experimental coronavirus vaccines that are to be applied in Turkey. Health Minister Fahrettin Koca announced in early September that vaccines developed by Russia and England are being evaluated to conduct phase 3 trials in Turkey. On a rather intellectual note, Professor Dr. Akova explained that another vaccine will be available in October. This vaccine will not be from China, as the Chinese vaccine is in an inactive condition. This means that it is obtained through the entire inactivation of the virus. The Russian vaccine, on the other hand, is obtained through putting the genetic material of the virus to a different virus. The British vaccine is conducted through the same manner as well. They all have different features, and it is not possible to say one is better than the other.
The 12th International Hrant Dink Award was presented this year during an online ceremony streamed on the social media accounts of the Hrant Dink Foundation. As always, the award ceremony took place on Hrant Dink's birthday, September 15th. This year's awards were granted to the human rights activist Osman Kavala and women's rights advocate Mons Hassan from Egypt.
Hrant Dink was a Turkish-Armenian journalist and intellectual who fought for the rights of the Armenian minority in Turkey. He was murdered in Istanbul on January 19, 2007 by a 19-year-old Turkish nationalist. Hrant Dink was a victim of hate speech, which made him become a target. That is why the International Hrant Dink Award is presented to those who work for a world free from discrimination, racism, and violence. Each year, the award is granted to one person from Turkey and one from abroad. It is granted to the individuals who take personal risks to achieve these ideals and break the stereotypes. The Turkish recipient of the award, philanthropist and human rights activist Osman Kavala, has been in prison since 2017. His unjust imprisonment has become emblematic for many of those who are also subjected to unfair prosecution for simply exercising their rights to peaceful opposition. In his letter delivered from prison, Kavala emphasized the intercultural dialogue for peace building. I believe that prejudices between different segments of society and those living in different countries can be overcome by using the mind, communicating, and listening. The international recipient of the Hrant Dink Award was the women rights activist Moz Hasan. Moz Hasan has been prominently fighting against sexual harassment of Egyptian women and pushing for a change in the sexual crime laws of the Egyptian constitution to safeguard women. She is one of the pioneering activists of the feminist movement in the Middle East and North Africa. Hassan also expressed her acknowledgements in the letter she sent from Egypt. I am honored to be many of the feminists from around the world who received this award for their struggle against all forms of discrimination against women and other vulnerable groups. In addition to the award itself, the award committee acknowledged more people and organizations who shed light to humanity with their struggles as inspirations of 2020. Among the special performances of the night, prominent names in Turkey's music industry like Can Bonomo and Kalben were present with their performances. The night ended with a song called The Last Minute Goal, composed especially for the ceremony by Arto Tunçboyacıyan.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.